I got a default judgment. I served her. She didn't respond, getting him every other weekend. And then she took off, and we couldn't find her. So we filed with a child abduction.
What is going on, guys? My name is Mark Reel Jr., the Father's Rights Attorney. I'm the founder and CEO of Real Father's Rights. You're going to be listening or watching to a new episode of the Father's Rights Playbook. And on today's episode, I have managing attorney here at Real Father's Rights, Ryan Dreyer. Ryan, how are we doing today?
Doing great, Mark. Thanks for having me.
We're going to go ahead and jump right in to our 3 discussion topics today. We got a little bit different format. So we're going to take 3 current events today, and we're going to talk through the issues that we've seen in the past that we potentially see in these cases. So I hope you guys enjoy. Let's go ahead and hop into the first topic.
Major new development after a teenager went missing. Her father is now behind bars. He's been arrested on suspicion of child abduction.
The 15-year-old later turned up at our ABC 7 studios. Eyewitness News reporter Rob Hayes joining us live at the Monterey Park Police Station with new details on this case in which each of the girls' parents are blaming each other. Rob.
Yeah, that's right. And even though that girl was found days ago, the family is still holding a rally. You could see them gathering here in the lawn outside the Monterey Park Police Department. Now, though, they're asking for custody of that girl to be placed with her father. But in a twist, that father was just arrested today for child abduction. On Tuesday, Jeffrey Chow sat at a news conference, teary-eyed, happy that his daughter was found.
We really appreciate what everybody's done and helped out with.
But today, Chow is behind bars. The Monterey Park Police Department announcing they arrested him for child abduction, conspiracy, and falsifying a police report. Investigators say he was behind 15-year-old Allison Chow's disappearance. Allison went missing July 16th, last seen riding her bicycle headed to her aunt's. And then on Tuesday, a week later, she walked up to our front gate at ABC 7 in Glendale. Glendale police whisked her away. Later that day, Jeffrey Chow and his attorneys held a news conference, one that painted Allison's mother as the reason Allison ran away.
Yes, I think she ran away because she didn't want to be with her mother.
Annie Chow, the girl's mother, today releasing a lengthy statement saying that she's been estranged from Jeffrey for more than a year and that he drove a wedge between her and her daughter. She writes, "I believe that Jeff coached Allison to make false accusations against me, and he continues to thwart and undermine my relationship with Allison. Before our separation, I had a close, loving relationship with Allison." Eyewitness News also learned that Annie Chow filed for a restraining order against Jeffrey the day before their daughter went missing. And court documents show the next day, the judge gave full custody of Allison to her mother. But the divide in the Chow family runs deep. Jenny Chow, Jeffrey's sister, urging the courts to give custody of Allison not to her mother, but to her father, or even her. Now, Jeffrey Chow is being held without bail. He is due in court on Monday.
Wow, a lot going on here just down the road from us. My first thought when this story broke, and all we knew was the dad was going to be charged with these crimes around false reporting and potential abduction, was what caused this. So it sounds like mom went and filed a restraining order against dad. Now, we don't know the context of the restraining order. We don't know what happened. I think that's the first piece that comes to mind here is parents in the middle of a nasty divorce. Sounds like mom may be estranged. There may be some relationship issues. Dad may, given experience, there's a good chance he probably is involved in the alienation in that relationship. But sounds like to me that what started all of this was a restraining order filing that was done for the purposes of gaining custody.
I mean, that's what it would appear to be, because it seems like the daughter was with father prior to that. And so the only way that you're going to get that fast of a custody order is to include your child in the domestic violence restraining order, basically saying that either the child's been abused or abuse has occurred in front of the child, necessitating sole legal, sole physical, with no contact. So this is what I'm thinking is she filed the restraining order. She gets sole legal, sole physical custody of that child, regardless of the current status of custody between the parties. So she subverts that. I'd like to know if there was a previous custody order in place that this domestic violence restraining order superseded.
Well, I'd be curious to know, did she file under a different case number and completely subvert what the status quo was? Because based on that, I'm going to go ahead and assume that there probably was some sort of temporary custody order. It probably was some form of joint custody, but this teenage daughter did not want to be at her mom's house.
Correct. And remember, everyone, that when you have about a 15-year-old, you're getting into the area where police will be very hesitant to enforce an order that a child doesn't want to follow. It's not a great look for the police to cuff up a child and take them kicking and screaming to the other parent's house. So the police have actually in recent years gotten even less likely to enforce when you have an older child. So mother very well may have done an end around. And this is what we call forum shopping, ladies and gentlemen. You don't get what you want in one jurisdiction or in one courtroom, so you go to another courtroom to get it. Now, can we fix these things? We can. So was dad best off by, and allegedly, kidnapping the daughter? The daughter obviously was going freely to father, but he's hiding her and he is subverting this court order. Time and time again, people, no self-help. You need to fight these in the courtroom. The first thing you should have done is contact a lawyer and get this ready to go. I know 3 weeks can seem like an eternity, but it's not. Not when you're now facing conspiracy.
Yeah.
You're facing lying to the police.
You're held without bail.
You're held without bail. You're facing real felony charges that now will be used as a basis to keep your daughter away from you. You might have been able to knock down all the temporary restraining orders. They're just temporary. They don't go on your permanent record. They don't hit you for life criminally. You're not registered under CLETS. If he would take the time to fight this, I mean, he could have had the daughter come in and testify later. No, I don't want to be with mother. I've had a restraining order where mother was granted custody of the children and the oldest children just refused to do it. And so it got nowhere. But here we have someone that has created so many more problems for themselves and their family, right? By entering into self-help. You just can't do it. You can't do it. Yeah. Even if it's true and untrue, even if it's infuriating, right? You can't do it. Yeah. You just can't.
Well, let's roll it back. And I think something that comes up in a lot of cases that we deal with, a question that a parent has is, what age can my child talk to the judge? Now, that's a little bit of a gray area question. Now, statutorily in the state of California, at the age of 14, you have the right to have your voice heard. But that doesn't mean the judge is required by law to follow it. Now, I've seen kids, especially kids it seems like that they have older siblings that are on the more mature side, as young as 7, 8, 9 years old, talking to a custody evaluator, talking to a social worker with the county who's going to be making a recommendation. What advice would you have if you're a parent and the child is refusing to go to the other parent per the court order?
Well, again, depending on the child, but to me, you need to go to that pickup and drop-off point. You have to bring that child there. And then that child has to act independently with you saying, no, go, you should go, right? I've brought you here. But you can't just not show up. You can't, because then it's on you. You have to go to that custody exchange point, and then that child needs to refuse, right? It's then on the child, but you need to make sure that the logistics are covered, because that child, for the most part, doesn't drive. They can't get there, right? You have to at least be seen to be doing the minimum requirements of the custody order. Or we call that contempt, ladies and gentlemen, punished by, for each count, 5 days in jail or 120 hours of community service and a $1,000 fine and possibly attorney fees, right? For each count. So to me, the parent, again, and I don't want to repeat myself too much, has to make that child available.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Which obviously we know could be very, very challenging when you have a teenage kid. If you get 16, 17 years old, all of a sudden that kid's driving. Maybe the order says they're sleeping at that other parent's house. You're really limited in what you can do.
Absolutely. And going back to, can the children testify? I've had judges. Each judge is going to do things a little differently, and that's why you need the knowledge of counsel. Because I've seen 8-year-olds testify, or what will happen is they will have the child come in and they'll just meet with the child in chambers, and they'll talk to the child, and then they'll report to the attorneys. I've also seen where
that's probably my favorite. Is the judges that bring the kids in, they go on the record. The judge, sometimes, the last time I had it, they actually did it in open court. The day after the trial, they brought the 14-year-old in, and on the record, sealed transcript, the judge had a conversation with the 14-year-old child and then reported back generally what the conversation was about.
Yeah, and that way you don't have these two parents staring at this child on the witness stand. What a ridiculous choice to make a child have to do that in front of their parents. And so I don't like it when judges do it. And it normally doesn't happen because that's just so unfair to a child. They're going to remember that the rest of their lives. Other thing the judges might do is have the attorneys write down the questions that they want to ask, and the judge will ask them those questions under the record. So, but I mean, I have seen it once they're 14 or 15 where they're put on the stand and both their parents are staring at them. Gosh, what a choice that must be for a kid. I don't like that. I like to do it any other way.
Or a choice the parent made. So,
well, yeah. I've seen a lot of times where I recently had a case where the opposing side wanted the children to testify, and he actually believed that the testimony would help him, but he didn't want to put them through that. And the judge still had the children testify. Yeah. And now it worked out for us, but, try to protect your children, ladies and gentlemen, from this. They're blameless in this divorce. If there's one thing I can get down is protect your children first.
Yeah, awesome. All right, moving on to our second topic today. So we have probably one of the highest profile divorces that kind of had wrapped up last year has popped back up, and that involves Kevin Costner. And the title of the article that came across my timeline was Kevin Costner feels like he's been stabbed in the back after Christine Baumgartner divorce. All right, so in the article, it says Kevin Costner is feeling the pinch. Not only did he funnel $38 million of his own money into an ill-fated Western, but the 69-year-old also has to shell out $63,000 per month in child support to his ex. In addition to that sum she received, now there's reports that she is actually close to getting engaged to his former Yellowstone co-star and one-time good friend, Josh Connor. Lot to unpack there. Let's first start out with, I think, one issue that we see on a regular basis. One of them is going to be a little bit more novel, the child support piece and super high income individuals. But I think one thing that men go through feels like women bounce back and get into their next relationship significantly faster than the man does. In this situation, she's now what appears to be in a serious relationship with a good friend of his. What advice would you have for guys when they see their ex in that next relationship so fast?
Well, I mean, that's the punch in the gut, right? And I've long time had discussions with clients where they're now paying for their wife to have a relationship with their physical trainer that they paid for, or these other things. And we live in a no-fault divorce state. And it can cut deep sometimes.
Well, here's the first thing I always tell them, and I'll ask you as a question. Like, does it matter that they have a new partner?
Not in the least. Unless for spousal support, you can show cohabitation, right? Which decreasing their need for support. Just won that the other day in a courtroom. But child support, no. Property division, No. Division of your business? No. None of these things matter. And it can be such a betrayal. And this is where we have mental health issues from that, because it's like I was out working and she's cheating on me with my friend.
This is where we see a lot of restraining orders come from too.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's a tough pill to swallow.
Yeah.
I mean, could you imagine? I mean, just from a personal level, I have to look at him and go, geez, man, that sucks. But the more you bring it up in court, you're just going to seem like a scorned man, that you're angry, that you have an axe to grind, that you're doing things just to get back at them. Yeah. It's best, take your L, brush yourself up, brush yourself off, go on a nice vacation, do whatever it takes, work out, start working out a lot again, play some sports, but you've got to get yourself out of it, because you walk into the court, it's sad, no one cares.
Yeah,
I will as your attorney, but it's not an argument.
It's not an argument you even want to bring up. You mentioned that. You don't want to come across as a scorned lover. So it's like one of those things where you're like, hey, I get it. I hear you. This sucks. And I know you want to tell the judge how she was a whore and how she cheated on you and how she did all these things. But it just doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I had that recently where a client wanted to, I mean, he couldn't get past it. And I kept saying, if we go this way, we lose. Yeah. Right? You know, if you quit your job right after you find out that they have been cheating on you and then say, oh, I can't pay support, it's not going to go over that well. And like, you've got to look at the timing of things. And so again, whether it be therapy or go play some golf, anything you can do, because you have been wronged. I'll say it to you right there, and the law does not care. Maybe in New York or a fault state where there's there's fault divorce, but here it's tough. It's tough noogies, man. Like, and I hate to say it, but it doesn't.
Well, you did bring up one point. It does, and it could help him. I don't know the specifics. I want to say he paid out a large lump sum in terms of spousal support. But if she gets engaged and she's living with someone else, that gives you grounds, even in a long-term marriage. And this is somebody who's a film star. They probably have significant income. They probably have significant income, not Costner level income, but it could end up saving him a significant amount of money. I don't know if that makes him feel that much better, but spousal support is that one thing. And I think for, we'll say, the average man, a lot of times they'll get really angry and I don't want my kids around this other man. And you have to look at him and say it doesn't matter. And the more you bring this up, the more likely they're going to make it difficult for us to prove that they're cohabitating, that he's helping support her. And that's ultimately going to cost you a significant amount of money to either try to prove they're cohabitating or just to keep everything kind of all riled up.
Absolutely. I mean, because the ways out of support are 1, prenup, right? 2, and maybe he had a prenup because we're not hearing about support, or there was a big buyout,
They did have a prenup. She challenged the prenup, and then the prenup was found valid. But I mean, even in that sense, there's large payouts involved in the prenup.
Especially in something like that, it would have been negotiated where there's the payout. So the other 2 ways are out is, did they remarry? Are they cohabitating? Or do they have a separate property estate capable of self-support? I have terminated based on that, based on large property payouts, that if you project their income from investments and everything else, shows that they can meet their marital standard of living, right?
Yeah, because she actually fought for nearly $200,000 a month in support, which wasn't what was in the prenup.
Right. $63,000 a month. That's tax free, right?
Yeah. Oh, that for me, I tell people that's the biggest challenge with both child support and spousal support. Yeah. Is that, as in most cases, a vast majority, over 2/3 of support is paid by, over 80% of support's paid by men. Is that you make that money, we use gross income to calculate your support numbers, you pay taxes on it, and then they get that tax-free income.
Right, right. So say you're paying $7,000 a month and you had to make $10,500 just to get there, and now you get no credit for it whatsoever.
Yeah.
It's rough. That was actually a tax change. Was that 2019 that went into effect? Prior to that, I believe you could deduct spousal support. Might be 2018.
Yeah, I think for me, that's one of the things I always talk about with if we could fix child support. Right now, the payor, it feels the burden
Right.
at a very, very significant level. So if we flip the tax burden of child support's a write-off, and then if you receive it, you're taxed on it, the tax base doesn't change. The state's not affected, but it's the person who's actually seeing the benefit of the money
Right.
that's paying the tax on it.
Right. I mean, because let's be honest, everyone out there, it is a bitter pill to swallow to have been cheated on, and then with a friend as well. So you're doubly hit, right? We've actually even had DVs where it's based on one incident where the man finds out that their partner is having sex with their best friend, and they make some comments. They get riled up.
Yeah.
And we've actually defended them successfully, but can you imagine the shock and the anger and the depression that comes from this, and then to be hit with support?
Yeah.
I mean, it's insult to injury. It really is.
Definitely. And we'll move on to, and this is, I think, one that's probably more for curiosity than practicality. What a lot of people don't know is that if you are an extremely high earner in the state of California, they may not even use the child support calculation to determine what your payment would be.
That's absolutely true, and that's probably what happened here. I mean, because there's generally a cap, or you can also do like a Smith-Ostler order. But, you know, the idea, there's the famous case of in re marriage of John Cryer, right? Where he had, I believe it was something like 99% custody of the child. But he still ended up paying his ex-wife, or as the mother of his children, $10,000 a month. Yeah. And the whole idea here is that when the child spent time with mom, should still have it at the same standard of living as the other party. And I've had that recently, or it was years ago, where one person had a house on the harbor and one lived in an apartment. And, you know, we were very successful in showing, yeah, there shouldn't be a cap here, because the child shouldn't live 50% of the time in a mansion and 50% of the time in a 2-bedroom apartment. So child support's a wacky thing. You need counsel for it. You need good counsel for it. Yeah. And especially if you're an extremely high wage earner, it helps, because if you have variable income, you're a salesperson, you get crazy overtime. These are all things that you need an attorney to be there for.
We see it with creatives out here. If you're in the entertainment industry where you make large chunks of money at once and then you may go a period of time without. That was part of the Costner piece, was that the show was coming to a close and he didn't have anything else planned at the time.
Right. And so, look, support needs to be based on predictive indicator. It needs to be based on what's going to happen in the future. And so they'll look at, well, what have you been doing in the past? If it's not predictive of what's going to happen in the near future, you need to make that argument. Like, hey, this gravy train is ending. This is not predictive. And I also used to do that right after COVID. Like, hey, you can't look at the COVID year. Some people thrived. Some people tanked. It wasn't not a predictive indicator of what was going to happen in the future, right? Unless we're just going to be shutting down the country all the time, right? Yeah. We have to look at predictive indicators, and it's not always the past, right? Yeah. That's what the court wants to look at. So you have to fight them and show that was a one-time thing. That was a bonus that I will never get again. That was a deal I closed that I will never get again. And it should be thrown out as an outlier.
Yeah. All right, so we'll move on to our last topic here. And this is an interesting one. All right, so the story goes, a Utah mom is accused of kidnapping her 5-year-old daughter over a year in the middle of a divorce and taking them off the grid to a cult that touts Bitcoin as the cure for over-controlling government. Kimberly Dell Davidson Drollist spent 14 months planning the disturbing January 2023 abduction of her daughter, ripping her from her Utah home and bringing her to a cult compound in Missouri led by Paul Dean. Wow. A lot going on there. And I've actually had a case that kind of tracks along this. I normally say you should never use the word kidnapping if one parent keeps the child longer. Like, that's not kidnapping. They're not following the court order. Your child was not kidnapped. You don't call the police and say, my child's been kidnapped. But in this situation, I would. The case I had, it involved a child was born here in California, in the Inland Empire, and mom had, in the middle of the night, upped and left with the daughter and moved to rural Arizona on an Indian reservation and actually had a fifth wheel that it was just a bunch of people with RVs, fifth wheels, just doing drugs out on the Indian reservation, this little compound. And she actually brought the child back to see dad, and she went to go do whatever. Dad didn't let her back in the house, and she lost her mind. But dad hadn't seen the kid in like 45 days. She just disappeared. So normally I'm like, you do not use the kidnapping word. But I think this is one of those few cases where it's like, this legitimately, they were kidnapped and brought to a space where law enforcement couldn't get to them.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a difference between staying an extra day on vacation, right? Or doing a couple things, maybe taking the kids out of state. They say that they're not going out of state, but they go out of state. Yeah. And yes, it's a violation of a custody order. And that's a key too. Is there a custody order or isn't there a custody order? Yeah. Because if you're both the parents, it's hard to kidnap. To me, it's the intent to permanently deprive the other person of contact with the child.
This is 14 months. You went and lived in a cult compound for 14 months.
That's kidnapping.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, and so what do we do when there's kidnapping, right? Well, if you've got a custody order that you can enforce, you go to the child abduction district attorney's office in your county and you file with them. They will now start the process. They'll try to help locate the child. If you already know where the child is, even better. And then they will initiate proceedings with the local authorities in the other state. If it's another country, far more difficult. We're not going to get into that
Hague
today.
Convention,
Yeah, it's Hague
Convention. It's a whole other episode.
That is an entire, and I have a humdinger for one for that. But I've had one where the children were being kept from opposing side. There was a restraining order, but she wasn't even following the basic custody. I was able to, once the restraining order went, I got a default judgment. I served her. She didn't respond, getting them every other weekend. And then she took off. And we couldn't find her. So we filed with a child abduction. She ended up being found in Las Vegas. The DA told her to come back. She refused to come back. And so the day before Thanksgiving, they called me up and said, hey, have your client out at this address. We're going to go arrest her. They kicked down her door. They arrested her. He took the children back. She spent quite a while in jail. And he ended up getting sole legal and sole physical custody. Now, it went on far beyond that for years after that.
I can imagine.
Because he wasn't an angel either. But that's how you get him back, right? Is you sometimes they're going to require that you get an order from the family court, so you might have to file a parentage action. If you can't prove you're a father, if you weren't already married, you're going to need to get a petition to establish parental rights. Yeah. And you're going to need to get some kind of judgment in there. Which is hard, right? Because how am I going to get service? Well, you're going to have to publish. We could go into the weeds on that. But you need, for the DA, you're going to need something to get them to enforce that order. Yeah. You're not going to go try to find them and counter-kidnap them. This is not a movie, right? Don't do that.
All right, well, that one's a little bit more of a wild, probably not necessarily as practical. I think the rule of thumb is that is kidnapping. Most of what you claim is kidnapping is actually not kidnapping. It's you and the other parent not agreeing.
Correct. And that's called, we enforce it by contempt, or you bring it up to the court. But again, it's not necessarily kidnapping. It might be a violation. It might be a criminal. Maybe the DA picks it up as a criminal act, but it's not a felony. It's a misdemeanor.
Yeah. All right. Well, with that, Ryan, thank you so much for your time, your insight today. I hope all our listeners and viewers enjoyed this episode of the Father's Rights Playbook, and we'll see you guys all again next week.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.